Welcome back to the State of the Line podcast. NCCI recently hosted our Annual Insights Symposium, where the industry's most respected thought leaders delivered exclusive workers' compensation insights and analysis. Today is a special episode of the podcast. Two of our AIS presenters, Sandra Kipust and Brian Stein, will be discussing their presentation in a segment that we're calling Experts on Experts.
Hello, my name is Sandra Kipust, NCCI Senior Practice Leader and Actuary. And this year at AIS, I led a session called Industry-Specific Trends Uncovered.
Hi, I'm Brian Stein, Assistant Actuary, and this year I presented Driving Risk, Trends in Motor Vehicle Accidents.
Brian and I are recording these episodes from our home offices today, meaning that we skip one of the most dangerous parts of any job, which Brian will tell you all about, is driving.
That's right, Sandra. That everyday activity, just getting behind the wheel, carries more risk than you might expect. And this is reflected in the data. In the workers' compensation system, motor vehicle accident claims, or MVAs for short, are over 70% more costly than the average lost time claim.
What do you think makes them so much more expensive?
A big reason for that is the complexity of these injuries. MVAs are more than twice as likely to involve injuries to multiple areas of the body compared to other types of industrial accidents.
That's interesting because some of the more common workers' comp accidents tend to be strains and falls. And our research showed that a reduction in these accidents has been putting downward pressure on frequency for many industries, like, for example, restaurants. How do motor vehicle accidents compare?
MVAs are admittedly less common and account for 5% of lost time claims. However, because they cost more on average, MVAs account for closer to 10% of lost dollars. And in terms of frequency, we haven't seen any real decline for MVAs in the last decade, with the exception of a big drop during the pandemic.
Is that the effect of remote work?
That's definitely part of it. There was also less driving overall during that time, and some jobs haven't fully returned to the road. For example, Class Code 8742 includes salespeople that used to travel a lot to client locations. But since the pandemic, their MVA frequency has decreased by more than a third. So clearly they aren't driving as much these days.
So it could be workers are working virtually, or maybe just the nature of their jobs have changed, required less travel, right? For example, less of a need to visit clients or vendors.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. But then on the other hand, you have Class 8810, Clerical Office, which also had a big drop in MVA claim frequency during the pandemic. The difference is that for 8810, MVA frequency has mostly come back to where it was before the pandemic, while the overall frequency for this class has stayed down. So there's no one-size-fits-all story. But these are both office jobs. And that's a sector your presentation focused on, right, Sandra?
Yeah, it is. Those two classes you mentioned are both remote friendly, and the combined office sector has almost 2/3 of its payroll concentrated in remote friendly classes. The shift to remote work has contributed significantly to the decline in frequency of all claims in the office sector, but by even more so for just the remote friendly classes in the sector. Their frequency has declined by nearly a third since 2019.
So office jobs are an example of where we see a reduction in frequency in the years since the pandemic. Did any industry stand out on the opposite end where frequency increased?
There was one in particular, and that's education. Now, because of a lot of education occurs in the public sector and would be self-insured, it's mostly not captured in our data. But for private education, frequency initially fell during the pandemic as teaching went virtual, as you can imagine. But since then, as everyone got back in the classroom, we've seen 3 years of consecutive increases, which is not something we've seen in any other industry.
Have we been able to identify a driver behind those increases?
The cause of injury with the largest increases in frequency is accidents where the worker was struck or injured by something. So when we saw that, our next question was struck or injured by what?
That's what I was thinking too.
When we drilled down, we saw that these injuries included kicks, bites, and stabbings. So unfortunately, it seems like workplace violence may be on the rise for educators. This is a topic that NCCI is currently researching, and not just for education, but workplace violence in general. So we may have more to share on this in the future.
I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Is there anything that our audience can take a look at if they want to learn more today?
There is. We have our industry drill down series on ncci.com, and the new industry trend report is due to be posted soon.
That's great. Going back to the presentation, were there any other industries that you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, the other sector we focused on is healthcare. So, employment for healthcare workers has outpaced the all industry average for the past few years. And often when this happens, we see a corresponding increase in frequency.
Is that because shorter tenured workers are generally more prone to injury?
Exactly. But here's what happened. In healthcare, we're still seeing frequency decline, and it's actually declining by more than the all industry average. A reduction in strain injuries seems to be part of what's going on here.
That's welcome news.
It is. And I know that you mentioned that frequency overall in motor vehicle accidents isn't declining, but is there any good news when it comes to motor vehicle accidents?
Yeah, one area that stood out is the trucking industry. They've seen several years of declining MVA frequency, starting even before the pandemic.
Do we have a feel for what's behind this improvement for truckers? I know this is a class that stakeholders often ask about.
There are a few factors we identified that may be having an impact, including some recent regulations and improvements in safety technology like telematics. For example, drivers are now required to use an electronic logging device to track driving time and ensure they're getting the right amount of rest. And in terms of technology, dash cams are being used to monitor both the outside and inside of the vehicle. New software allows the cameras to identify risky driver behaviors like distracted driving and provide immediate feedback. So there's been an overall focus on safety, and we're seeing the results through lower frequency for trucking, which also happens to be the top class code in terms of workers' comp premium.
I'm glad to hear that. As you would expect, trucking is the largest class in the transportation and warehousing industry. And while we see frequency for trucking and transportation and warehousing declining as well, if we look at the entire transportation and warehousing industry, frequency increased in 2021, and that was due to strains and falls. And what happened was deliveries from online shopping surged with the pandemic, and these strain and fall accidents occur as drivers will run in and out of their vehicles, delivering packages to our front door. On a positive note, though, in 2023, transportation and warehousing frequency started improving. You mentioned before that motor vehicle accident frequency for all classes decreased by a lot during the pandemic. Has it reverted back up?
MVA frequency has come up a bit, but it's still lower than where it was before the pandemic. The change in the latest year and the data we've seen so far for accident year 2023 suggests that the flat trend of the past decade may continue. It's something we'll be keeping an eye on.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more. This has been a lot of fun, Brian, and I think the two of us could keep on going on this topic for a while, but let's wrap it up here.
Thank you so much to Sandra and Brian for joining the State of the Line podcast. And as you heard, there is so much more to be said on these topics. Let us know if you have questions or even if there's a certain topic you'd like to hear on the next episode. We'd love to hear from you at insights@ncci.com.
This podcast is the copyrighted material of the National Council on Compensation Insurance, 2025. All rights reserved.